And for years and years and years, I always said that there are more organizations in Frankfurt per square inch than any other place in the world. So there was always somebody that would get involved because of an issue. I attribute it to the Quaker background. They're always involved in discussing things. So people are involved, makes a difference. The history of every neighborhood is unique. I just happen to know Frankfurt's history, so it is a unique history. It's got a whole different history than any other section of the city. We had early Quaker roots. We had a Swedish settlement here before that. All of the land was not sold through Penn, but a group of Quaker businessmen in England called the Society of Free Traders. So we weren't Liberty land, we were separate land. And they fled England because they were being persecuted as Quakers. Frankfurt is the oldest country road in the state of Pennsylvania. It was laid out by royal warrant in 1683. So it's always a place where, at any time of history, Frankfurt has a connection to it because of its location. It was originally an Indian path. The reason we were laid out earliest was because Penn had land up on the Delaware, and this was the way you got to Pennsbury. So the oldest bridge in the United States is further up on Frankfurt Avenue in Holmesburg. So there's it has a great long history because of its location. All the neighborhoods became part of Philadelphia in the act of consolidation, so that all these outlying areas that were essentially villages, or we were a borough, became part of the city in 1856. So Holmesburg and Germantown, they all became part of the city at one time. I'm a member of the Frankfurt Historical Society. It was difficult for me to get in because they weren't open. They had become an older group of people who were afraid of the changes in Frankfurt in the 70s. So I happened to sneak in one day and picked up a membership, which was $5, and I started coming to the meetings. And it was a wholly different institution, and I'm sorry to see part of that go, where it was silver teapots and glasses and cups, and it was a throwback, and it was quite charming. But we still have the same atmosphere of hospitality, where we want to entertain and educate, and then share it with the people that come. So we still have the best tea in Frankfurt. I like the fire buckets and the fire hat. The Frankfurt Volunteer Fire Companies began in 1756, so we have the records and the minutes from the fire companies. We were lucky enough to have the buckets. So when you went to a fire, you had a leather bucket, it had your name on it, so that at the end of the fire you could get your bucket and go home with it. So we have a lot of the old Frankfurt names on the bucket. And then we have some of the ceremonial hats, leather top hats with the Washington Fire Company on them, which was on Frankfurt Avenue. So they sort of link the past with the present. We had a fireman on our board for several years, and he could come up and name all the tools that we had because they still use them in the fire department. So I guess that's one of my favorites. William Irvington was a landowner in the area. He was one of the founders of St. Mark's Church on Frankfurt Avenue. And he was essentially considered a gentleman farmer, but ended up being the person that started the Victorian building boom in Frankfurt, because he owned a lot of the land around here. His house was where Overington Park is now, and his mansion Oakland stood there. He left it to the city, and eventually became vandalized, and the city tore it down. He sold the land to the Garson family for the mansion. So essentially, he started the Victorian part of Frankfurt, which is what we're essentially in now. But it didn't stop him going out and fighting the fire when he needed to. And later on, when they became professional, you would have to have a fire mark in your house for them to fight a fire. So we had our own fire insurance company, Frankfurt Fire Insurance Company. And we have some of their plaques, too. Lydia Dare was a Quaker woman who lived in Center City. And supposedly, her father was a tavern owner, but when they had a lecture on her from a Quaker group, she was actually a midwife. And so she did a lot of nursing during the Revolutionary War. So she overheard the British talking about attacking the revolutionary forces here. And so she walked up under the guise of getting her flour ground. She came and walked up to the Swedish grist mill, which was right at the corner of Wamrath Park in Frankfurt, and then left her flour, went up to the King's Tavern on Rising Sun, reported to the troops there, let them know what was going on, then walked back, picked up her flour, and went back to town. Our former librarian at our Frankfurt branch would always say things like, well, things have to bottom out before they go up. And I go, all right, and then we think, well, is it bottoming out now? Is it going to get better? I'm afraid now, partially because of the economy, that all over the States, but here in Frankfurt, we're losing small businesses and also institutions that have been around for generations. And I think that's very sad. Because it took a lot of effort to start this institution. It took a great many people to decide to establish a Y in Frankfurt. It took a great amount of people to start the Historical Society, that get together, make the meetings, collect all of this information. We've been open since 1905. It's a long time, and we always find someone else to commit themselves to it. But I worry now when I see other institutions folding. The Frankfurt Day Nursery was a nursery that had been there at least through all of the 20th century that was for single parents, and they closed their doors about 5 years ago. So I worry about things ending. I was pointing out to you about the mural we did that was from a photograph in Frankfurt. So I like that because it's a way of getting back the buildings that are gone and the meaning of those buildings. But then when I got up to where the Circle Theater is, which is still here, it was built in 1930, I thought it would be really great to see all the people that one time used Frankfurt for their leisure activities, where we had 4 movie theaters, we had a vaudeville house, we had lots of restaurants and shops, and Frankfurt was sort of a destination to come then in the 30s and 40s, up through the 50s. And I always find that so thrilling when people talk about that. And I can just see the avenue filled with those people. It was such a lively area where it had the only atmospheric theater in the city. So you had lights that twinkled in the ceiling, and you had a sunrise and sunset in an Italian garden on Frankfurt Avenue, and it sat 1,000 people. So neighborhoods change, but there's always the ghost of those old places and people that enjoyed them. So yeah, that's what I'd want. Frankfurt is history. It's more than history. It's a group of people that live here and loved it. So it's a neighborhood. Frankfurt is a neighborhood.